Are we ready? All right, great. Thanks, everybody, and welcome to all of you that are here in person today. This is the June 18th, 2024 Landmark Preservation Commission meeting, and I am officially calling it to order. The first thing that, it is 1 p.m. The first thing that we do during a commission meeting is to introduce ourselves. I'm Julie Johnson. I'm a Historic Preservation Project Manager, and I was nominated by the community at large. Graham, do you want to start?
I'm Graham Johnson, I'm also a Preservation Project Manager nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
I'm Nick Fusianis. I'm an architect and developer, and I was nominated by the American Institute of Architects.
Hi, I'm George Dennis, retired law enforcement, and I was nominated by History Colorado.
I'm Erica Warzel. I'm an architectural historian and preservation consultant nominated by the community at large.
And I'm Larry Sykes. I'm an architect nominated by History Colorado.
And I'm Brittany Bryant, Denver Landmark Preservation staff.
Great. All right, before we get going any farther, I know that we have some people joining us virtually today. So I've got a couple of audio tips for you. For better sound quality, we strongly encourage you to download Zoom on your desktop, your laptop, tablet, or mobile device. You can click audio settings to bring up an additional menu and then add a background noise suppression, which is helpful. Test your speaker and microphone, adjust their maximum output volumes. For presenters or anybody giving a public comment virtually, when it is your turn to speak, to mute or unmute, you can click on the microphone icon at the bottom of your screen. Expanding the menu next to the microphone will reveal additional options. You can select your speaker and microphone devices. You can test your microphone and speakers, adjust their maximum output volumes. And if you're still having audio challenges, you can switch to your phone for audio. All right, next. Oh, okay. Let's see. So the first thing we have on our agenda are meeting records for approval, but we actually don't have any. So that's a quick one. Public comment period at the beginning of every meeting. We've reserved some time for the members to have members of the community to have 2 minutes each for comments about historic preservation in general. This does not include any projects that are actually on our agenda today. It's just historic preservation in Denver in general. If anybody here would like to speak in something general, just raise your hand. If anybody virtually would like to speak, you can click the hand raise button in Zoom. Dial *9 on your keypad to raise your hand if you're joining by phone, or you could email landmark@denvergov.org with your name and phone number if you're having difficulty with this option. And then we'll keep track. If anybody wants to talk, we'll keep track of the 2 minutes so you don't have to. Is there anybody here in person that would like to speak in preservation in general? Doesn't look like it. Anybody virtually? No? Okay, great. Then we shall move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda, these are routine design review items and recommended for the commission by staff for approval without discussion. Applicants with items passed on the consent agenda should coordinate separately with the landmark preservation staff to receive a certificate of appropriateness. There is no public comment for consent agenda items. The chair will announce the consent agenda by address. The chair asks that the commission desire to remove any items off of the consent agenda for further review. The commission members can announce any ex parte contacts and conflicts of interest on any items. The commission will make a motion and vote, and just so you know, the commission can only consider information that was included in the application materials that appears on the LPC meeting website. All right, I shall read what we've got on today's consent agenda. 2023-ZLAM-160 at 95 Bannock Street in the Baker neighborhood. 2024-COA-315 at 1701 Wine Coop Street, number 311 at Denver Union Station. We have 2024 TAXC-008 at 900 East 5th Avenue in the Alamo Placida district. All right, commissioners, do you have anything, any concerns, anything you want to pull off?
I do not.
Okay, no ex parte or conflicts of interest, anybody? All right, do I hear a motion from the floor to accept said consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I will move to approve the consent agenda.
All right, do I hear a
Second.
second? George has seconded it. All in favor, aye? Aye. Approved, nay. All right. The consent agenda has been approved. If anybody is here in person on a consent agenda item or joining us virtually, you're free to go. You can, of course, stay with us if you wish. But you, at this point, just check with your this landmark staff person you've been working with for your certificate of appropriateness. All right, now we are going on to the public hearing process. The chair will announce the public hearing agenda by address. Commission members will announce the ex parte contacts and conflicts of interest. Staff will introduce the application and recommendation. Commissioners can question staff. The applicant presentation will be limited to 10 minutes. Commissioners may request the question the applicant. The public comment period for a public hearing is actually 3 minutes per person. And if you're here in person to speak, just raise your hand and we'll get you up at the desk here to give your 3 minutes of testimony. And if you're joining us virtually and would like to make a comment, just use your little hand raise function or dial *9 to raise your hand or email landmark@denvergov.org. And then the staff, after public comment period, the staff can clarify if necessary. The commission will deliberate and then the commission will make a motion and vote. Alrighty, we have one item, I will call the public hearing to order. And we have one item, it is 2023 L-006 5086 Brain Street in the Kunzmiller House. And Becca Deershow is our staff person. Take it away, Becca.
Thank you, Julie. I'm gonna have a really official looking paper today.
You
so-
have.
Really excited to be here. The item before you today is the designation application for the Kunzmiller House at 5086 Brain Street in the Berkeley Regis neighborhood. Now I'm gonna try to advance. This is an owner-supported designation brought forward by Councilwoman Amanda Sandoval on behalf of the owners, Jeff and Jeannie Laws. The property is located in Council District 1 on the north edge of the city. You can see it up there. It's kind of hard to see on the screen, but right next to the Willis Case Golf Course and adjacent to the Elgibel Shrine. Here is a map of the proposed boundaries for the designation, which follows the property boundary of the site. As a reminder, to be a Denver landmark, a property must be at least 30 years of age, meet 3 of 10 significance criteria, retain its integrity associated with its period of significance, and be related to a historic context. I'll go through each of these elements and show how the property meets these criteria. The property was constructed in 1924, and therefore it meets the 30 years of age threshold as it celebrates its 100th birthday this year. And the application illustrates how the house meets 4 out of 10 significance criteria, A, B, C, and G, which are listed in bold on the screen. So let's look at each of these criteria in turn. So the Kunzmiller House is significant under criterion A for having a direct association with this development of the city, state, or nation. This property is located in the far northwest corner of the city of Denver, but its location represents the development patterns of Denver over the course of its history. Just a brief note on terminology, the property is located within the modern statistical neighborhood of Regis. However, historically, the Regis neighborhood was part of the larger Berkeley neighborhood and was part of the original town of Berkeley. So throughout the application and this presentation, it will often be called Berkeley Regis, as the two are still really closely linked today. So the land that is now Regis and part of Berkeley was purchased by John Brisbane Walker, who operated an experimental alfalfa farm called Berkeley Farm. By 1890, the farm was sold and marketed for residential development, largely unsuccessfully. Although Denver proper was booming in population, the distance of Berkeley from downtown prevented residential interest. Even the presence of a streetcar line on 50th Avenue, sewer services, and electric lights failed to bring development to the area prior to the turn of the 20th century. In 1902, Walker once again controlled the land and created a private golf course on part of Berkeley Farm. He platted land next to the golf course, calling it Berkeley Park Heights. However, it wasn't until the 1920s that this land piqued the interest of developers. Adolf Kunstmiller was one such investor who purchased lots 1 through 6 of Block 3 of Berkeley Park Heights in 1922. At the time, it was directly abutting the golf course and still is today. So in 1924, the Kunstmillers built a large family home on the land, and this is a 1933 aerial. The Kunstmiller house is outlined in blue. At the time, this was one of the few properties in the area, and its adjacency to the golf course helped the property retain its rural feeling, even as the city had continued to develop. Even when Elgebel Shrine purchased the nearby golf course in 1929 and constructed their Moorish Revival Shrine, which is in the red box below, it did not alter the character of the neighborhood. The continued presence of the Kunstmiller house with its lush lot adjacent to the Willis Case Golf Course allows it to illustrate the character of Berkeley's earliest development patterns, even as the neighborhood around it changes. As we all know, there has been a lot of development happening around the Elgebel Shrine site. There have been a lot of condos and apartment buildings going up, but it still manages to retain its rural feel. The Kunstmiller house is also significant for its direct association with Dorothea and Adolf Kunstmiller, German and Prussian immigrants who made significant contributions to the city over their lifetime. Dorothea Kunstmiller moved to Denver's Auraria neighborhood when she was 5 years old. She graduated from Denver Public Schools, and after receiving her degree from State Normal College in Greeley, which is now UNC, she returned to Denver, where she would serve on the Denver Public Schools Board of Education for 24 years. At the time of her retirement, she was the longest serving board member in the history of the district. During Kunstmiller's career, education was one of the few areas in the public realm where women could play an important political role. Women through the mid-20th century were largely expected to exert their influence in the private realm, often at home with the nuclear family. Education, as it related to the raising and influence of and shaping of children, was one area where they could operate in the public civic realm. Kunstmiller ably navigated public office, which included some very high highs and very low lows for the district, weathering the Great Depression, and then the unprecedented post-war World War II growth of the district. She was a popular and important member of the board, easily winning 4 6-year terms and serving as vice president of the board for most of her tenure. Many times she won the largest number of votes of any elected board member in each election. She was recognized as a strong advocate for teacher salaries and educating children with mental and physical disabilities. She won many accolades for her service, including an alumni award from the University of Denver in 1953, the North Denver Citizen of the Year Award in 1955, an Eddy Award from the Denver Public Schools Retired Employees Association in 1960, and she was then inducted into the Denver Post Gallery of Fame in the same year. Most notably, DPS named the 1957 Kunstmiller Junior High School, which is now Kunstmiller Creative Arts Academy, after Dorothea Kunstmiller. This was the first time the DPS board named a school after a living person. Dorothea's husband, Adolf, also played an important role in Denver's civic development. Born in Prussia, he immigrated to Colorado as a young man. He advanced from a lowly bookkeeper at the Zang Brewery to becoming president of the American National Bank at the height of his career. He started working for the German American Trust Company, which at the time was Colorado's second German-speaking bank. In the aftermath of World War I, and in an effort to prove their allegiance to the United States, the bank rebranded as the American National Bank, and it's still in existence today. Adolph was active in many fraternal organizations, but played a particularly important role as an ally to the Jewish community throughout his life. Although not Jewish himself, Adolph was recognized for his support of the community, working with the Anti-Defamation League and providing loans for several local synagogues and for Denver's Rose Hospital. He served as campaign treasurer for a fundraising campaign to support the ex-patients tubercular home of Denver in 1932. And in 1951, he served as vice chairman of an initiative headed by the Anti-Defamation League for Colorado to pass the Fair Employment Practices Law to curb job discriminations for community groups among Colorado. A 1954 article in the Intermountain Jewish News extolled Adolph's 49 years with the American National Bank and claimed that he was a good friend to the Jewish community and a powerful factor in Denver's progress. The Kunstmillers, as a couple, illustrate the power that ordinary individuals have to make a difference in their sphere of influence, advocating for fair pay, equality, and justice for people different from themselves. As immigrants to Denver, they settled in and rolled up their sleeves to make their city a better place, and they had a direct influence on our society. The Kunstmiller House is also significant as it embodies the distinctive visible characteristics of the Spanish eclectic style. Although similar to the contemporaneous Spanish colonial style, Spanish eclectic architecture is a more vernacular, simple style without the level of detail and ornamentation of the colonial style. Nostalgia for both Spanish vernacular and high style architecture became a national trend in the 1920s, primarily after the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. Most well-known examples features decorative parapets, brackets, and really ornate details. However, architects such as G.W. Smith also introduced a version of the style that was simple and austere, rooting their designs in an imagined Andalusian farmhouse, a verdant pastoral setting with masses of white geometric planes and surfaces rising from the greenery. As one critic noted, the houses have great style, but are not necessarily stylistic. You can see an example of G.W. Smith's work here on the left, and the original design of the Kunstmiller House on the right. As a simple design with little ornamentation, the Kunstmiller House is a rare and distinctive example of this simplified vernacular style. The 1924 Kunstmiller House exhibits inspiration from the contemporary Spanish eclectic house designs of architects such as Smith. A simple massing and a modest entry into a linear plan with varying roof levels and an asymmetrical layout. Massed white geometric planes and surfaces, austere facades, and a few shuttered windows, red tile roof, and an understated parapet are other characteristic features of this style. In writing about the work of G.W. Smith and the advance of this more vernacular Spanish eclectic style, William Bottomley wrote, "Two outstanding facts must be noted. First, that the style chosen has relation to the setting, a tendency which is becoming increasingly more evident. The second, that the styles are being handled with a greater knowledge and skill and are being treated with more freedom. Free handling of the style, instead of imitating some old example and often copying it badly, is a sign of life. The combination of different styles and different motives in a new way, so as to fuse into a consistent whole, is constructive design." Setting is a really important component of the Spanish eclectic style. The Kunstmiller's house incorporation into a hillside garden achieves Bottomley's charge to settle the building within its geographic and botanical setting, while using a free hand with the style to give it a unique character which can still be seen today. Even the 1936 front dormer addition carries the same form and motifs as the original design. The dormer addition was built within the period of significance for the structure and is contributing to the design. The Kunstmillers added the dormer in about 1936, based on aerial photographs, given that there was no building permit for it found, to accommodate more family members living in this relatively small house, which is sort of a hallmark of vernacular architecture as it is changed to suit the residents' needs. So the Kunstmiller house is an excellent and rare example of the 1920s Spanish eclectic style house in Denver, and it was the only house of this style recorded in the recent Discover Denver survey of the Regis neighborhood. The Kunstmiller house is also significant as it promotes an understanding of the urban environment by means of distinctive physical characteristics and rarity. This historic subdivision dates from the early 20th century and was on the outskirts of Northwest Denver, in an area that feels more rural than suburban, both at the time of the house's construction and today. The substantial Spanish eclectic style house is on its expansive, large, lushly landscaped lot, still stands out. The large Brain Street parcel and fertile Denver basin allowed Adolf Kunstmiller to pursue his horticultural interests by planting native trees and other vegetation around the property to frame and shade the house without blocking its front range views. The contrast between the forested site and the stark white walls of the structure are important hallmarks of the style. Here you have a photograph from the 1920 issue of Architectural Record showing G.W. Smith's Spanish eclectic house with its substantial front garden. And to the right, you have the Kunstmiller house with a similar garden setting. We're also gonna try and do something special and play a video of the site. We'll see if it works. Yeah, this was taken on a tour of the site last September. So you can get a feel of some of the heavily forested nature of the site, which is so important to the site. And I'll just note that these winding pathways go throughout the site. I didn't think you wanted to watch 8 minutes of video that I have, but I do have the whole site. And then you can see at various moments, the house is really framed by the trees, and it's really set up to feel intimate and draw your eye around. So on May 2nd, 1965, in an interview with the Denver Rocky Mountain News, Adolf Kunstmiller recalled planting 125 evergreen seedlings in 1924 and noted that between 75 and 80 of these trees now towered more than 40 feet in height. And that was 80 years ago. Many mature trees survive on the site and can be attributed to the Kunstmillers' considerable gardening skills. The relatively tall house is perched on this heavily vegetated site rising above the Willis Case Golf Course to the north and gives the distinctive Spanish eclectic residents a strong visual presence in the Berkeley neighborhood. And as I mentioned, pathways wind through the expansively treed and heavily vegetated site, and its arbor, outbuildings, and pond all create a sense of a lush garden and an isolated residential oasis within Denver. So those are the criteria that the house meets. And now we're going to talk a little bit about its integrity. And this is an important discussion, especially given the changes that have been made to the property over the course of its lifetime. Chapter 30 requires that a landmark designated property maintain its integrity. Integrity is defined as the ability of a structure or district to convey its historic, geographic, architectural, or cultural significance, recognized as belonging to its particular time and place in Denver's history. This existing property retains a high degree of integrity within the proposed period of significance. The property is still in the same location, and although there have been changes to the surrounding area due to continued development, the neighborhood is still residential in nature, retaining both integrity of location and setting. And although there have been changes to the property's design, the most obvious of these changes, the addition of the front central dormer, was added within the period of significance and speaks to the changing use of the house by the Kunstmüllers. Another addition at the rear of the structure does not negatively impact the historic character of the house. Overall, the integrity of design, materials, and workmanship are excellent, and the continued use as a residence helps retain a strong sense of feeling and association. As appropriate for a property proposed for designation, the historic context is strongly interrelated to both areas of significance and the period of significance. The property is associated with the development of the Berkeley neighborhood and the wider development patterns of Denver. It's also related to changing architectural styles that grew in popularity in Denver in the early 20th century. The period of significance is proposed to be 1924 to 1975. The Kunstmüller family built a home on the lot in 1924 and remained in the house until 1975. This period of significance ends with the death of Adolf Kunstmüller in 1975, at which point the house was sold for the first time. The contributing and non-contributing features of the site are delineated largely by the period of construction and the period of significance. Therefore, the house and the front dormer are considered contributing features, as is the brick and stone, as are the brick and stone site walls and the pathways that date back to the Kunstmüller's ownership. Features such as the garage, the freestanding garage, there is an integrated garage that is the garage, sheds, and pond were constructed outside of the property's period of significance and are therefore non-contributing to the designation. It's really important to note that currently the Landmark Preservation Commission does not have purview over landscaping. We only have purview over hardscaping. So while the owners are looking into a conservation easement, the plantings on site may change over time. However, by calling out the paths as an important contributing feature to the designation, the owners and Landmark staff hope that this will help preserve the character of the site. And this aligns with Denver design standards and guidelines, particularly guideline 4.1, which says respect established building location, lot coverage, and open space patterns when locating a new building. So I guess it's kind of the opposite of open space. It's rather enclosed vegetated space, but I think the point still stands. As of 10 a.m. today, June 18th, Community Planning and Development has received 3 letters regarding the Kunstmüller House designation application. The Berkeley Regis United Registered Neighborhood Organization submitted a letter of support, as did 2 neighbors of the property. And those 2 neighbors and their letters were forwarded to you yesterday. CPD has received no letters in opposition to the application and no letters since 10 a.m. yesterday. Therefore, as the property meets the requirements as laid out in Chapter 30, Landmark staff is recommending approval of the application and forwarding to the council.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Okay, well done. Perfect. Is our applicant here? Yep. Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a seat, and you'll have 10 minutes between the 2 of you for your presentation. And please begin
Minor
with the
5 minutes
presentation.
and 30 seconds.
Well, I don't know, we've got a timer over here, so please begin with your name and address for our records.
Hi, my name is Jeff Laws and I live at 5086 Grain Street in Denver, Colorado. I'm nominated by Adolf Kunstmüller to be here, by the way. So thank you, members of the commission, for your consideration, and Councilwoman Sandoval for sponsorship of this application for landmark designation of 5086 Grain Street. We also need to acknowledge and thank the staff, Square Moon, Historic Denver, Brunn, HBR, and the Denver Assessor for prodding, support, advice, and guidance in this application process. Importantly, we are thankful for the efforts of Adolf and Dorothea. I love those pictures. In building and caring for our home, and Bonnie and Dave Lorenz for the initial 72 updating and the continued preservation and maintenance of Vrain until we inherited their trust and vision. We were initially scheduled for an earlier date for this hearing that would not have conflicted with the councilwoman's travel schedule, but she has sent her assurance that she will be in attendance for the remainder of the hearings and at her full support in person. We are pleased to present the application you have before you, and we believe that it meets all the ordinance guidelines for landmark designation, and we humbly request your approval. To offer some background on our application, Judy and I moved to 5086 Vrain Street after spending our first 20 years in Northwest Denver on West Hayward Place. While we have always admired the historic housing stock in our corner of Denver, we never imagined living in a landmark. Our wonderful Regis Heights neighbors are longtime residents, and our next door neighbor Kay is a grandniece of the Koonsmillers. Bonnie Lorenz, who sold us the property, alerted us to the history, and Kay has shared a trove of stories, photos, mementos, and reminiscences of her house as well as ours. We were very happy in maintaining the Koonsmillers' history and tradition at Vrain Street, while carefully updating the interior and caring for the grounds and the flora that we inherited. Through our engagement over the years with the West Highland Neighborhood Association and the Berkeley Regis United Neighbors and our business interests in the local mortgage and real estate scene, we became aware and supportive of the Denver Landmark Ordinance. The parameters did not seem to apply to us as we knew our home met the ordinance guidelines and would be protected by the Denver requirement to verify non-historic status for eligibility for demolition in the event that we were to pass on ownership in the future. It took the 2018 Denver assessor valuation to disavow us of this notion and to prod us into action. You are all aware of the development impacts our neighborhood has seen in the last 10, 15 years. And one major development was our neighbor to the south, the El Jebel Shrine. Given the new construction immediately adjacent to our property, the assessor elected to value the improvements on our property, that's our house, at $1,000 and the balance of the value as raw land for development. At $1,000 doesn't even cover the demo. We did not disagree with the determined valuation, but we were concerned with the methodology. Surely the structure should be considered differently. Naturally, we objected and appealed the valuation method with the historic eligibility argument. We were denied because the property is not an official historic landmark. So we began the process that has led us here today. We made it our goal to preserve this property. We made it our goal to preserve this property for the important and unique historic value it represents for us, Kay and Bonnie and Denver and the Koonsmillers. We consulted legal, valuation, and accountancy counsel to fully understand this process and the impacts personally and for the property. Forever is a long time. The councilwoman directed us to Historic Denver, who confirmed our hunches and referred us to Barbara and Jim Steely with Square Moon Consultants. Square Moon engaged and produced the application here submitted, and we deeply appreciate their efforts to research and compile this superb document. We learned so much through this process. Staff provided a thorough review and have recommended the application for your approval. This process has not only confirmed our view that the property meets the ordinance landmark requirements, but has deepened our appreciation of the value of the ordinance and the value of preserving historic structures in Denver. It is a privilege to understand, maintain, and further the Koonsmiller heritage, and we look forward to preservation in perpetuity with your considered approval. I would be happy to answer any questions And Barbie Steely is here for the technical questions that are outside of my scope. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Barbara, did you want to say?
Yeah, I wanted to say just a couple of things. I'm Barbara Stockman-Steely. My husband and I wrote the designation application. A couple of things kind of came to our mind that stood out. One is that there was not a lot of historic research or documentation to rely on the Berkeley Regis neighborhood, so we did a lot of original research. We also had not heard of Dorothea or Alfred Kunzmiller. And it was really amazing to learn about their story, as a woman, particularly Dorothea's story. She served on the school board for 24 years. I tried talking a couple times to the school board, and they could not confirm that she's the longest ever, but they thought she probably was had the longest tenure on the Denver School Board. So I just, I think the fact that this property is, it has this kind of agricultural story. It has this association with the Kunzmillers, and particularly, attracted to Dorothea and her story. I just feel like this is a really worthy designation. So.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for our applicants? No? All right, well done. You can have a seat.
Thank you.
All right, then we will go into the public comment portion of this meeting. Anybody here in person that would like to make a comment on this project, just raise your hand and we'll get you up to the desk. If there's anybody joining us virtually, you can, if you're on the phone, you can dial *9 on your phone or keypad to raise your hand, or email landmark@denvergov.org. If you in front of your computer, just click on your hand raise function, and then you will have up to 3 minutes to provide your comments, since this is a public hearing. Do we have anybody in person that wants to comment on the project? Okay, doesn't look like it. Anyone joining us virtually? It doesn't look like it. Okay. All right, then I will close the public hearing portion of this. Does the staff any additional comments? No? Okay. All right, commissioners, let's go into deliberation. What are your thoughts on this project, on this property?
I think it's always fascinating when you learn about something that is close and you never knew it existed, right? And that's part of preservation. So I think, again, the nomination, staff's report, I agree. It's a very cool property.
It's a fabulous property. Yeah. Erica?
Yes, I would agree. I think all the criteria that were laid out for us, the argument for each is very clear and persuasive. I especially appreciated the inclusion of landscaping and kind of the understanding of the whole site and not just the building. I think that's important. But also, of course, the stories of the Kunzmillers themselves. So I just want to thank the applicants for bringing this forward. I think that's really great, and I'm definitely supportive.
Okay, any other comments, commissioners?
I support as well.
No, it's fabulous. It's always fun to find little places like this in our city that we didn't, like Gramps, that you didn't know about. All right, then commissioners, do I hear a motion from the floor?
Madam Chair, I move to recommend approval and forward to City Council the landmark designation for 5086 Rain Street, the Kunzmiller House, application 2023L-006, based on landmark ordinance criteria A, B, C, and G, citing as findings of fact for this recommendation the application form, public testimony, and the June 11th staff report.
Graham, thank you. A second, George is seconded. All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right.
I'm sorry. I don't know, I'm an
That
aye.
was an error, right?
I'm
You're
an
an
aye, yeah.
Okay, George is an aye for the record, since you're seconded it. All right, then it has been approved unanimously. Congratulations and best of luck with City Council.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a beautiful property, really, really interesting. All right, we are moving now on to the design review project portion of our meeting. There are 3 items. I will announce the design review items on the agenda by order of their address. Commission members will announce any ex parte or conflicts of interest. Staff will introduce the application and make a recommendation. Commissioners can question the staff. The applicant will have 10 minutes to give their presentation if they wish. Commissioners can question the applicant. Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per person since this is a design review and it'll be 2 minutes per person. If you would like to speak regarding a specific project and you are not part of that applicant team, you can click on the hand raise button on your computer. For those calling via phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. If you're having difficulty with either raise hand option, you can email landmark@denvergov.org with your name and phone number. Staff can clarify after public comment if necessary. Commission will deliberate and then commission will make a motion and vote. And just to note, the preservation commission can only consider information that was part of the application on the LPC meeting website. All right, our very first design review item is 2023-COA-548 at 625 25th Street in Curtis Park. Our staff person is Crystal. Take it away, Crystal.
Thanks, Julie. So this is for 625 25th Street, which is located in the Curtis Park D Historic District. The structure was built in 1901 and is a multi-unit brick terrace structure. There is no period of significance listed in the ordinance for this district. I included a copy of that at the end of my staff report for your reference, though it does show a period of significance in our design guidelines for the district, which stated 1870 to 1891. So the applicant stated that 2 of the front windows were replaced here in 2001. This is a window violation that was called in. It's unclear if other windows were original, though from photos they did look like they were in disrepair and heavily deteriorated. The property owners replaced 5 windows on their unit, 3 at the front facade, 2 at the rear. And the applicant hired John Barnes with Altitude Windows and Doors, and they were advised to replace the windows with Anderson Woodwright double hung windows to match existing openings and sizes and style. Wood sills were replaced at the rear to match ones that were originally present. The applicant never applied for, received, review, and approval for windows from Landmark, so that's why it's in today for this violation. Next slide. So here you can just see some old photos that were provided by the applicants. The windows were not original according to the applicant, and as you can see, at least for the sills, were severely deteriorated. Here you can see those wood sills that were existing at the rear elevation. The applicant has stated that all of the windows on the rear of this structure had wood sills, so that's what they replaced with when they replaced the windows. Next slide. And then here you can just see one of the new windows and these new wood sills that were installed at that rear elevation. On the right is some material information for the new windows that were installed that shows they are a composite Fibrex material and not all wood or aluminum clad wood. So the new windows do not meet design guideline 2.1 or do meet design guideline 2.14, but do not meet design guideline 2.19E, which states to replace a historic wood window with a wood or aluminum clad wood window. The windows were replaced with this wood Fibrex composite material, which does not meet design guideline 2.19E. Therefore, staff is recommending denial of the application.
Okay, Crystal, commissioners, do you have any questions for Crystal? Doesn't look like it. Okay, thanks, Crystal. Is the applicant here? Is that you?
I'm John Barnes. I'm the contractor who installed the windows.
Would you like to speak?
Yes, I would.
Okay,
Do I
sure.
have to-
Yeah, just come here and have a seat. And I don't know if you know the routine yet, but just before you begin your 10 minutes, just start with your name and just for our records, please. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
My name is John Barnes, and I am the contractor who completed the work. And I own Altitude Windows and Doors. So I've been doing windows and doors for, it'll be 30 years in October. And when the homeowner asked me about his historic replacement, the first thing I always recommend to homeowners is the Anderson Woodwright windows. They were developed specifically for historic replacement. They have 3 different sill angles that usually fit most historic applications. I was not aware that this home was in the Landmark district when I sold the project. So I was kind of caught off guard when we got flagged in the middle of the project. So I know the two windows in front were a cheap builder grade wood or aluminum clad windows. Again, I met with the Anderson rep when they first rolled this product out in Denver over 20 years ago. And we thought it was perfect for historic replacement because of the custom nature. The two windows in the front of the house are fairly large. A lot of companies won't make a window that big where the balance system will actually hold the weight of the window. But the Wood-Rite windows were made specifically for that application and are more than capable of building a window that height and not worrying about the balance system, not holding the weight. So I'm not sure why a clad product of the Fibrex material can't be approved versus aluminum. I don't know what the parameters are there. The Fibrex is a much more stable product. It's not susceptible to hail like roll form aluminum is on the outside of an aluminum clad window. That's why Anderson chose to build that particular window with the Fibrex material. And Anderson's over 100 years old. They've never used aluminum in their exterior window cladding ever. The original 400 series windows are clad with aluminum. And when they developed this Fibrex product over 20 years ago, they just, in their mind, with over 100 years of experience, thought that Fibrex was a much more stable product versus aluminum, and especially in Colorado's climate with our heat and cold. Today's a prime example. It was cool this morning and it's going to get really hot this afternoon. So that's why I personally always recommend the Wood-Rite window, because it's perfect for historic restoration in most cases.
Okay. Can we get your address for the?
Yes, it's 11757 West Kent Carroll Avenue.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for our applicant? No, doesn't look like it. Great, thanks.
I think the homeowners.
The homeowners are with us? Okay, great.
So we're gonna move them over.
Okay, terrific.
Oh, that's a lot of these. I only know this one. Lisa Star too. He's my applicant.
Hello, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, great.
If you would begin please with your name and address, and then you've got 6 minutes and 58 seconds to talk about the project.
Wonderful. My name is Josh Pruse. I'm the one of the current owners of this property. The house was sold in between this project, and so the former owner, Lisa Starr, is the one that hired John Barnes and Altitude Windows to do this project, and then we kind of took it over. I think what I just want to add to John's comments was that as we obviously we know we kind of messed up and didn't get approval in the beginning of this process, but as we went into it and submitted our application, and I was really reading the purpose of these guidelines and the design process through the commission. One thing that really stood out to me was that the guidelines really talked about shape, size, look, features. It was only till later down in the process where it just one little mark of material, right? Throughout, even in different segments of architectural elements and materials, there's a lot more leniency. It appears by the guidelines to they had statements where feasible, right? When feasible, you can do this. But really, what I felt throughout the guidelines in here is to strive to accommodate the need of property owners to make modern improvements while protecting the character-defining features of Denver's historic landmarks and districts. Other statements of preserving position, shape, size. Those are the things when I read the guideline book of really what stood out to me as what was important to these landmark districts. And so, you know, and again, we talk about protection. I don't see it as we're not trying to replicate what we did in the past. We're trying to protect it and preserve its character. So that's, you know, that's why I feel like, again, this Fibrex composite window fits all of those things. It looks like wood. We kept the shape of the original opening, no changes there. If you stand from the street, you would not be able to tell. It's not a fiberglass, it's not vinyl. It looks like a wood window. And so I think because of that, you know, I really ask that for your approval on this project. I think that's all I have to say. So thank you for listening. Does
No,
anyone
that's
have any
totally fine.
questions to me?
Yeah, commissioners, do you have any questions for the homeowner? No, it doesn't sound like it. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
All right, now do we have anybody that would like to make a comment? And nobody here, okay. Anybody joining us virtually? Doesn't look like it. Yeah, we do. Okay, there we go.
Oh, is this working?
It is working beautifully. You have 2 minutes to make your comment.
Great.
Yeah, and you can, we'll time it for you, and please begin with your name and your address for our records.
Great. Yep. My name is Tom Davich. I live at 3248 Osceola Street in the West Highlands. I just want to note for the applicant that I understand that Landmark is actually in the process of updating its window guidelines to accommodate various like fiberglass composite products. And so in support of the applicants, while right now the material guidelines say wood or aluminum clad, I believe Landmark is in the process of changing that. And so their application, if it were to come back in the fall after those guidelines are updated, it's likely that it would actually be approved. So I want to make sure that the applicant is aware of that. So I, as a fellow homeowner, support the applicant because that Fibrex product is probably going to be allowed based on the updated guidelines that Landmark is currently working on. So I just want to raise that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so anybody else that wanted to make a comment? No? I'm sorry, what, Taylor?
No hands raised.
No hands raised? All right, okay. Then we'll close public comment. Staff, did you want to have anything else to say?
I really have no further comment on that. I would just also say we don't know what the guidelines are gonna update or not yet, so it's possible, but no guarantees.
Yeah. All right, okay. Commissioners, let's go into deliberation. What are your thoughts on this?
I think compared to the last window violation that we looked at in Cap Hill, the vinyl windows with the internal muntins, I think this is a little bit more of an edge case that shows maybe the need to consider, that product, especially since we do allow it on detached structures. Seems like, where's the line? But at the same time, I also think that at this moment, these windows do clearly violate the material guidelines. And so, I'd be in support of the staff.
Okay. Other thoughts, commissioners?
I guess I'd like, I'd like to ask my fellow commission members or maybe staff to help me understand. So with aluminum clad wood windows, we have the actual sashes that are made of wood that are clad with aluminum, hence the name. But here we have the sash itself is not wood.
It is wood on the inside. It's a solid
It's,
solid wood window
okay,
that's clad with Fibrix.
because it doesn't, I'm not reading that from the spec sheet, but Graham, do you have any?
I don't have a ton of experience with the Anderson product, but I mean, the cross section that we have in the specs that were shown appear to be 70% Fibrex with a hollow core, similar
Right.
to a vinyl window with an applied
Right,
wood interior.
right.
Um,
So, and hence, you know, I think kind of going back to what the concern is of like structurally, the dimensions of those sashes have to be different from what a wood would be able to accommodate, essentially larger sash members,
I
not
don't-
necessarily.
I don't know, yeah, not necessarily. I mean, what's challenging about any replacement window as opposed to a historic wood window is the limitation of that material. And
Right.
Fibrex has been around for a long time, and we find Anderson windows that are restored that are 100-year-old. You know, a vinyl window, a Fibrex exterior has a lifetime. It can't be repaired similar or in the same ways a wood window can. Neither can clad aluminum very easily, frankly. You know, even if that is a wood sash, if you have hail damage or if it gets dented or if that aluminum cladding starts to come off, that's a factory applied piece that's it's crimped in place. It's an alternative to paint for 20 or 30 years, but you're trading off indefinite painting for a
Right.
shorter lifespan. So I think that we're always splitting hairs with window recommendations, right? And it's not a double standard, but Fibrex is a material we're used to seeing because we approve it all the time on infill properties and non-designating, or non-contributing buildings in historic districts. I mean, you could split the hair even further, and the Anderson documentation we have talks about the coil stock, which was used in, trimming out the windows. That is aluminum cladding, right? I mean, it's in the aluminum coil stock. You can get that same material in steel. It's commonly used, for cleaning up edges and things. And you can see that somebody did a very creative job, prior to this for that front entry window that was an aluminum siding product, it looked like. So, I think in this case, there were not historic windows that were in place. That's pretty clear, both by the joinery details in the windows you can see and it's a product that we do approve in historic districts, just not for contributing buildings at this point. If it was an aluminum clad window, it would have been installed very similarly into an existing jamb, which is less destructive than pulling those jambs out to the masonry. Balance the sight lines a little bit there, right? So this one's tough. I mean, it's not as blatantly obvious as white vinyl windows in a dark wood frame. We've talked about it. We don't need to revisit advocating for, you can read the specific permitting requirements on Denver's website, and it says window replacements are not required for permitting, with a big asterisk that says unless your building's in a historic district. And that's where we get these inquiries. So, admittedly, I'm on the fence here, but requiring this homeowner to change these windows to an aluminum clad product is going to look identical. They don't have muntins. There's not a character defining feature that is internal, like Larry said. These are single light, double hung and fixed windows. It would take somebody who knows windows to see or feel, that it's Fibrex and not aluminum. So, I mean, I think we would be, we've gone both ways. We had a clad aluminum replacement we approved several weeks ago that was done without approval, but it was a product we approved. Here we have a product we approved sometimes in a building that didn't have existing historic windows. Frankly, in a building that has a lot of other types and styles of windows. This is a monumental standalone property. It's a very nice masonry structure, but we're splitting hairs here, is my opinion. And I could see a strong argument for, again, knowing that we have an active agenda to clarify this issue, for homeowners and historic district residents. And that this one's very much on a razor thin line to me.
I think to comment as well on the construction of these windows, I'm looking at this image of the corner sample on the application. It does look like that is mostly that the structural material of it is Fibrex. I think what's interesting with aluminum clad windows, I've seen many different corner samples from different companies, and some of them are straightforwardly aluminum cladding over a structural wood frame. Others are more of a kind of hybrid where clearly an aluminum extrusion, a hollow aluminum extrusion is doing some degree of structural work and is integrated with the wood, and somewhere the wood is, I mean, almost decorative on the interior portion of the sash. So I think that that's another argument for that aluminum clad windows aren't like inherently different than Fibrex in a lot of ways.
Manufactured product either way.
Correct,
Yeah.
And frankly, we, as a restoration process, often find that, you know, creating a skin, if you, I mean, it's the opposite of these clad windows, but sometimes the exterior is so weathered, but you've got a good style and rail composition that you can create what is essentially, I think, veneer, which is not atypical in how exterior doors are built, over a stave core or something similar. Again, a structural core that has a character material on the face, right? And I've seen historic doors built that way. You know, it's common practice in modern doors, but again, it's splitting hairs here.
Yeah.
So I, you know,
I think my main concern is just that when it comes to windows, that you know, my understanding of the material that's being used as the main structural members dictates how much frame or sash we see and how much it's taking up of like what would otherwise be open windows, and therefore, you know, steel cannot be replaced with something else, or wood versus vinyl, it can be very different. But when I hear kind of these hairs and then of, in this case, it's not super clear that there would be a visible difference between this and another material that we would approve. And then I guess I'll just add that, you know, I certainly remember other instances where there's been Fibrex replacement windows put in, but were very different in character, not just the material, but the character itself, you know, multiple, right, or multiple muttons that where it would have been a very simple 1/1 double hung. So I guess in all of those instances, I do really I hesitate a bit, but I agree that I think this is a razor thin example, and I feel like in this instance it's more equitable to to say that we can live with it.
So I just want to state that prior to the 2022 updates to the design guidelines, where we did several revisions to the windows section, the guidelines did say 2.20 replace non-original window that is out of character whenever possible. C, when replacing a non-original window, use traditional materials such as wood, particularly if other original windows remain on the structure. If all historic windows have been removed, an alternate material that closely matches the original in appearance, such as composite fiberglass for wood, may be acceptable. We removed that from the 2022 update because the commission was not approving fiberglass, Fibrex. We were having a lot of concerns over it. I will say in terms of our update project, the commission has given us the indication that the concern is more over the profile than the materials. While we haven't definitively decided if fiberglass is going to be reintroduced into the guidelines or Fibrex composite, I mean, it's something that we are discussing and have had conversations on. And then I would also like to say, if you're considering this material to be acceptable, please look towards intent statements for why this would be approvable.
Right.
Thank you. I think it's probably an important distinction too, that whether these were a Pella Reserve or Marvin Ultimate, or whatever a traditional wood clad window versus Fibrex would be, that any insert like this, you're gonna lose the margins of whatever spring balance or, you know, jam is required. And those are, the manufacturers make those as thin as they can. But that's the same, you know, whether this was a high-end custom, you know, wood window or a more affordable Fibrex. You're not gonna tweak that minor differential. And I think to the style and rail dimensions, Erica, that you mentioned, you know, a typical 3 or 3.5 inch bottom rail and a 2 or 2.25 inch style is what we got here, as opposed to that 1.5 inch vinyl slider or, you know, a straight fiberglass window that is not meant to be an elevated architectural piece. So, yeah, thank you, Brittany, for sharing that.
Yeah.
I just want to add a little bit of commentary.
Sure.
First of all, I, in this instance, given the clarification given by staff, I support the Fibrex and could approve this. I think the broader issue here is that this is one in a row of units in a historic building in a historic neighborhood where some oversight would have benefited the structure from city staff to introduce some degree of consistency. Because as I look at the neighboring structures or units, I see bigger offenders relative to the violation of profile. And where it's not just one generation of jam and head and sill, it's 2 generations. And therefore reducing the window size to porthole dimensions next to other windows that have preserved their size. So just as a note to city residents and property owners, this is one service that staff can provide to help avoid issues like this.
Thanks, Nick. George, we haven't heard from you yet. You have any thoughts?
I don't really have a huge feeling. Profile is met, size is met, location is met. I think, you know, this time with clearer guidance in the guidelines and rewrites might make fewer of these issues appear. But for right now, I think I can live with the windows they got because they're substantially appearing and located to what they should be.
All right, any other discussion before I ask for a motion?
Just following Brittany's recommendation of like an intent statement that we can refer to.
Right.
Unfortunately, I don't have this design guidelines in front of me. If we had something
bet
that would be
Brittany
helpful.
does.
I got them right here
Oh,
too.
good.
And Graham, of
I love
course.
that.
I should know that.
Well, and I think too, the motion to deny only referenced criteria E of 2.19,
Right.
which says, if I roll to it,
Material.
yeah, replace with wood or aluminum clad wood, steel with steel. But the intent statement that we're getting back to, I think would be to maintain pattern and location of door and window openings to preserve the facade and functional relationship. The other intent statements talk about preserving original windows which were not existent, or to enhance the energy efficiency of those which were also not existent. So I think if intent statement 2G, to maintain pattern and location, is the best that could be achieved in this instance, and guideline 2.14, which also talks about patterns and proportions, is a reasonable justification.
All right, all right. Do I hear a motion?
You did the work, Graham.
Madam Chair will move to approve application 2023-COA-548 for window violations at 625 25th Street per design guidelines 2.14 and 2.19 and intent statement 2G, including presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All right, let's take a vote then. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? All right.
May I make one comment just for your benefit as you see these issues come up in the future? There's a big difference between that Woodwright product developed by Anderson's Core Line Company and Renewal by Anderson, two separate animals completely.
Understood.
Renewal by Anderson is a totally separate division of Anderson. And this window was developed by Anderson's Core Line architects and designers to meet historic restoration. The Renewal by Anderson product is a totally different product line, just for future reference. So thank you.
He can provide it to Crystal, but I think, thank you. I think
Okay, all right, well, thank you and congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate your.
Of course, we are on to our next design review item, and it's 2024-293 at 3248 Osceola in the Packards Hill District. And Jesse is our staff person. Hi, Jesse, go for it.
All right, so today we're looking at 3248 Osceola Street. This building was constructed in 1929, or 25 rather, and is a contributing building to the Packards Hill Historic District. So a little background on the Packards Hill Historic District is that it was designated as a local district in 2017. So it's a relatively new district for Landmark. In 2019, this property was cited for window violation, and then later in 2021, after the current owner took over the property, they were cited for additional violations on site. In total, the violations included replacement of the windows and doors, installation of an HVAC unit, installation of rear yard fence, installation of front yard terrace retaining wall, concrete flat work, and exterior lighting on the garage primary structure. So again, this property sold in 2020 to the current owner. The windows were not disclosed to him as a violation, but he did receive notice of violation for the other items on that list in 2021. The applicant is requesting retroactive approval of the doors, HVAC unit, rear yard fences, retaining walls, concrete flat work, and exterior lighting. The applicant is going to bring the window violation forward to the commission at a later date. We've worked with them to provide some flexibility once our design guidelines are updated. So Landmark staff is recommending denial of the current application in front of you, citing design guidelines 5.8 and 5.18. And I will spend the next few slides just going over our recommendation and reasoning. Next slide. All right. So we'll just kind of move through the list. The previous owner removed and replaced the front and back doors on the primary structure. It is unclear if either of those doors were historic to the home. New doors were installed in 2019. The front door is a quarter light craftsman style wood door that matches the style of the primary structure. That door is divided light, and the divided light pattern is simulated divided light with a metal spacer bar, as you can see from the photos here. The back door is a still half light door. It's also a divided light door, but does not appear to have a spacer bar. The back door to the house is not readily visible from public vantage points. Staff feel that the doors do meet design guideline 2.24. Next slide. Moving on to HVAC and fencing. So the HVAC is outlined with the light blue boxes, and it was installed on the north side of the house and the setback from the front wall of the house. The unit will have limited visibility for public vantage points, meeting guideline 2.63. The applicant also added 24 by 24, not fencing, but pavers. So the applicant also added 24-inch by 24-inch stone pavers along the south and west sides of the property as indicated by the red arrows. The stone pavers have minimal impact on the historic structure and will have limited visibility from public vantage points, as this is up on a hill or a slight rise. And we do feel that it meets guideline 5.2. Next slide. Moving on to the fences. The rear yard fence is composed of 2 fence types. The perimeter fence is 6 feet tall wood fence with vertical pickets as indicated by the red lines on the site plan. A second interior fence runs along the south side of the property as indicated by the light blue line on the site plan. The interior fence is 4 foot 2 inches, is a 4 foot 2 inch metal fence with vertical pickets and is more than 50% open. The perimeter fencing is coplanar with the front wall of the house. The interior fence runs the length of the property, terminating into the perimeter fence and the garage wall. So staff do feel that this meets guidelines 5.6. Next slide, please. Moving on to the terraced retaining wall. This is located at the front of the property. It was added by the current owner. It is roughly 9 feet 7 inches on the north side of the lot and 29 feet 7 inches on the south side of the lot. The wall features 3 terrace walls with a minimum depth of 7 foot 2 inches. The concrete, the terrace wall does not feature a landscape buffer at the sidewalk and was built using trapezoidal concrete blocks. The retaining wall has curved corners that do not fit the historic context and do not meet the design guidelines 5.8, specifically 5.8A, B, E, and H. Landmark staff would like to note the applicant included several examples of retaining walls in their application materials. Staff would like to note that the majority of the retaining walls that were included are not historic retaining walls or were added prior to district designation and are non-historic. Next slide. And then the final violation that we're noting on site, they installed 3 light fixtures, and this was the previous owner that installed the light fixtures. So they installed 3 new light fixtures on the front of the primary structure and on the east and west walls of the garage as indicated by the yellow triangles and arrows. The light fixtures on the house features a simple lantern style sconce with clear glass. The fixture on the west wall of the garage is a simple lantern style sconce with clear glass. And the fixture on the east wall of the garage is a directional spotlight motion sensor fixture. The Denver zoning code 10.7.4.2 requires exterior light fixtures to be full cutoff fixtures. And then landmark guidelines require that exterior fixtures direct light downwards. The proposed fixtures do not meet the Denver zoning code 10.7.4.2 or design guideline 5.18. So landmark staff are recommending denial of the application for the following reasons. The retaining wall does not have a landscape buffer, features curved corners, and is built in with trapezoidal landscape blocks, failing to meet guideline 5.8. The light fixtures do not direct light downward, failing to meet guideline 5.18.
All right, are there any, thanks, Jesse. Any questions for Jesse?
Yeah, I have one.
Sure, George.
Can you help me understand what a full cutoff fixture is?
So the full cutoff fixture would be the light bulb is recessed. So for example, a gooseneck light fixture that completely covers and shields the light bulb would be an example of a full cutoff. There are also sconce style where the light bulb is recessed up into the top of the sconce so that it is not an exposed light bulb.
Okay.
And in the past, we've gotten clarification from CNIS as to whether or not we would allow frosted glazing to prevent glare. But they stated that it needs to be a full cutoff where that light bulb is not exposed in any way. If you can hold your hand up behind the glass and still see your hand through it, then that's not a full cutoff fixture.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow.
Learn something every day, George. So I guess I have just a question. So a number of the items on the application are, you're approved, they do meet guidelines.
Correct,
Yeah.
yes.
So should we deny this particular application, what happens to those items that do meet guidelines?
So they would have to resubmit an application that hopefully would address the concerns or comments that commission has during deliberation. If they were to meet the guidelines cleanly, we could likely review it through administrative review. Because these are new features that are added, and if they just bring them into compliance per the guidelines, then that's something we could do administratively.
Okay.
The windows, that of course will come in
They'll
a
come
different
in.
application, and that would be required to come before the commission because it was a full replacement of historic materials.
Okay, all right, so basically okay, I got it. Thank you very much, Jesse, I appreciate your help.
Certainly.
Anybody else, another question for Jesse? Okay, great, then let's move on to the applicant. Is the applicant here? Is it you? No, okay. Is our applicant joining us virtually?
Yes.
Okay, then let's move them over. Hello, oh, hi, there you are.
Hello.
Can you hear us?
Hi.
Yeah, hi.
Yes.
Hi, welcome. You'll have 10 minutes to tell us about this project. And please begin the 10 minutes with your name and address, and we'll time it so you don't have to worry about the time on your side.
Great. And before we get started, though, I did prepare some slides. So Jesse, if you're able to pull those up, and make sure we have that content ready for the commission.
All right, hang on.
Great.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Davich. I'm the homeowner at 3248 Osceola Street. I want to provide some additional context and background to the materials that Jesse just presented to you. Next slide, please. For additional background, Jesse already explained some of this, but again, the property was acquired by an out-of-state investment company in 2017. They made a number of modifications to the home prior to my purchase in 2020, primarily the windows, along with some other exterior modifications like the lighting that we just discussed. That initial landmark violation was given to the previous owner on December 19th, 2019. I purchased this home as a first-time home buyer, looking to settle into a vibrant, welcoming community to grow my family with my wife. During the real estate transaction, Fidelity National Title found no pending proceedings, unsatisfied judgments, unpaid charges, citations with respect to this property, and I was not aware of any of the open landmark violations at the time of purchase. So in short, these violations don't show up in title work. The lack of transparency with that is frankly fundamentally broken. I do have some correspondence with Amanda Sandoval's office, and I know that I am not the only one that has fell into this problem. And frankly, if I knew of this violation, I would have never purchased this home. So, and as Jesse said, on February 26, 2021, almost a year after I had purchased the home, Landmark issued me a violation, which was stemming from those original windows, the original violation with the windows, and then expanded that to include the terrace retaining wall and the other materials that were previously presented. And this is the first time that I became aware of any landmark or zoning issues with the property. Next slide, please. So first, let's just go through the lighting. I am requesting a zoning exception for this. With the primary structure, it does not emit a bothersome glare. It's covered by a porch. Really, this is not something that you would notice when you're walking along the street. And it illuminates my steps, which is necessary for safety, package deliveries, and walking out the door at night. With respect to the lighting on the garage, there's some context where there was a two-car garage that was being constructed during the real estate transaction. Seller funds were put into escrow, and then after the construction was complete, those funds would be released. Both Denver Zoning and Landmark approved final permitting for this garage under these permit numbers here, and the existing garage lighting was present at the time of those permit finals. Landmark then went and issued a certificate of appropriateness on March 2nd, 2021, and then the escrow funds were subsequently released, which removed my recourse to actually correct this issue with the seller. And then just additionally, garage lighting deters theft, which is an increasing concern with incidents in our alley. As recently as May 13th, one of the garages on my block was broken into. And so security lighting is a matter of public safety and really should just stay as is. This doesn't seem to be an issue for any of the residents in the district. Next slide, please. So now, next, let's get into the retaining wall. Again, I'm requesting a specific LPC exception for our retaining wall based on how it is visually similar with existing retaining walls on the same side of Osceola and the same block. There are 3 other retaining walls, which I'll demonstrate in another slide, but it looks the same as those. It shares many characteristics with those walls as the other ones that are grandfathered in prior to the 2017 designation. I would also argue that the current landmark retaining wall guidelines are not reflective of Packard's Hill homes. And subsequently, the Denver Hill nor retaining walls are discussed in the Packard's Hill designation bill CB 17-903. So frankly, retaining walls or the Denver Hill, they're neutral with respect to the historic components of the district. That bill discusses the importance of women's history as well as specific types of architecture, but there's no discussion of the Denver Hill or retaining walls. So given that, I believe that the existing retaining walls in the neighborhood should be considered when determining like what is allowable here. And then lastly, the wall is compliant with Denver zoning code. Transportation infrastructure did not oppose to the existing construction. And I will continue along with the permitting process to close this out, but I am blocked on landmark approval. Next slide, please. I want to also share some statistics regarding the retaining walls that are in the district. Next slide, please. So as I previously said, I believe that landmark guidelines are not reflective of Packard's Hill homes. There are 72 homes in the district that have a retaining wall. Only 20 of those are compliant with the current landmark design standards. That's 20 of the 72. And 4 of those walls fit the historic context. As Jesse mentioned, I've shared a number of photos in the application in my correspondence with her. We've determined that only 4 of the walls in the district fit the historic context. And I will also demonstrate that I don't think those even fit the design guidelines either. Next slide, please. So let's go through those 4 walls. Next slide, please. The first one is at 3237 Osceola. There is a concrete buffer between the wall and the sidewalk. We're not sure on what the history is between like sidewalk expansion and like why this was filled in with concrete, but it's not really landscaping. To me as a passerby, if I'm walking past this, this is no different than a no buffer, which is similar to what I have with my wall as constructed. Next slide, please. The next wall is at 3825 West 32nd Avenue. It has rounded returns, both the stairs to the entryway of the property as well as in the alley. So you can see with this context, these rounded returns were actually present on a historic wall. And so that needs to be taken into consideration. Next slide, please. And additionally with 3823, which is adjacent to the previous property, it also has rounded returns based on a prior Google Street View of this property. Its wall has since been rebuilt prior to the designation, but again, rounded returns were present on this wall. Next slide, please. And then lastly, for completeness, I am showing you the 4th wall, 3231. It does fit the guidelines. I will say that the sidewalk was rebuilt with flagstone. The buffer here is really just a patch of dirt full of weeds, so I don't know if that really qualifies as landscaping, but it is based on the guidelines. I assume this fits your requirements, but I'm showing this for completeness. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's look at the other walls that are on the same side and same block as my property. Next slide, please. So I have 3280 Osceola, 3272, and 3264. Basically, we have these 3 houses in a row, and then my property is 1 house beyond that. Each of these walls, they share terraced retaining walls. There are no landscaping buffers. And then there's rounded returns present on 3272 and 3264. And then you'll see that 2 of those walls were built with trapezoidal blocks. I will say that my landscaping bricks are less trapezoidal in nature. Like from the front, you can't even tell they're trapezoidal, but I do have the rounded returns constructed. But if you look at these walls, there are no landscaping buffers, which I think is important to call out, because if you then require my wall to have this landscaping buffer, it's not going to look congruent with the rest of the walls on the block. And so with that, we'll go to the next slide. And just to kind of summarize here, again, with the lighting, again, Denver Zoning and Landmark previously approved the permits for my garage and removed my recourse to actually correct any of the issues with the lighting with those seller escrow funds. And the existing lighting on the garage and the primary structure are not problematic to residents, nor is it bothersome. And frankly, it is also just a matter of public safety. And then with the retaining wall, as constructed, it is similar to other walls on Osceola and in the district. Rounded returns were present on 2 of the 4 historic walls. The concrete landscaping buffer on 3237 is no different than a wall without one. And then if you look at the other walls that are that predate the designation or grandfathered on my side of Osceola, the landscaping buffer would be incongruous with those. And then lastly, I just want to reiterate that again, reading through CB or the CB 10 or the designation bill, I forgot the exact number off the top of my head, but again, the Denver Hill nor retaining walls were discussed in that bill. And so again, the impact of retaining walls are really neutral with this district. And again, as Jesse already said, it's relatively a new district. And so I think this needs to be taken into consideration with what we're going to allow for retaining wall in Packard's Hill. And then lastly, it is compliant with Denver zoning code, and I will complete the permitting process as requested by Landmark staff. But that requires an exception here, which I am asking the commission to consider. Again, I appreciate your time and hope that you'll consider this additional context when making your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for our applicant? Larry, there's a question for you.
So you said that you were seeking a zoning exception for the lighting. Are you asking for that from the zoning department, or are you asking that from us today?
Yeah, so I tried to clarify this with Jesse, and I understand that there's like a separate like zoning variance process. So I don't think that that LPC actually has the ability to like grant this exception. So for whatever is within your ability to grant an exception for, maybe it's like the particular, I don't know, style of lighting or something, but I understand this bumps up against zoning. And so if Landmark does not have an issue with the lighting, then I will proceed with the necessary variances with zoning to get that approved. And so, but I'm not sure of what the process here. So maybe Jesse, you can clarify what the expectations are.
We do not have the ability to accept lighting. The full cutoff is required by zoning and has been in there since at least the 50s, we think. We as Landmark staff were not informed that this was going to be enforced until December of last year. So we take the brunt of this review because it's not checked anywhere else, and the joint and Landmark zoning inspector cannot sign off on a building permit with the light fixtures not being full cutoff fixtures. But we cannot grant an exception to the light fixture and the full cutoff requirement.
And I would also add that the guidelines very clear about light fixtures should direct light downwards. So that's Landmark's dog in this fight.
A question to clarify that. Security lights, typical garage. If there's a bulb that's recessed into that housing and it's pointing downwards versus like a modern LED that's not, is every security light in the city and county of Denver a non-cutoff fixture that technically doesn't comply with zoning's requirement there? Just to ask that question.
Right, and we've had the same question. We did speak with the supervisor over at zoning neighborhood inspections, and she stated that this would not be considered a full cutoff and is in violation of that code requirement. So Landmark is not going to actively look for every violation. That is an impossibility.
That's a lot, yeah.
But when light fixtures such as this have been called out as violations since at least 2019, we have to follow through. And this is the guidance that CNIS has given us, that code will be enforced. On the Landmark side of things, separate from that code, because we aren't enforcing that code necessarily. The Landmark guideline does say specifically it has to direct light downward.
Yeah.
May I add to this?
Amy. I spoke to Louisa, zoning supervisor, about this issue when Tom first raised it and his concerns with being asked to comply. There is no process for a variance. And to your question, Graham, there may be different security lighting standards for, say, commercial properties, but for a residential property, there is no exception. It's a full cutoff fixture, and what's installed doesn't meet the code as we understand it.
Understood, yeah. I'm thinking of like an old school floodlight where you'd have to screw the
Yeah.
bulb way in there and that would technically comply, right? Something like that. Thank you for clarifying.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Any other questions for our applicant? All right, Tom, thank you very much. We will go on to our public comment portion on this project. See if there are
Great,
any
thank you.
public comments. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. There's nobody here that wants to make a public comment, so anybody up? There, we've got somebody.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you. Please, you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment. And please start your 2 minutes with your name and address for our records, please.
Great. Good afternoon. My name is Sam Ziegler. I live at 3504 Newton Street, about 3 blocks away from the subject property. And I'd love to comment on both the wall and the lighting.
Sure.
On the retaining wall, my comment's inspired by the design guidelines that say they should consider properties on a case-by-case basis and be flexible and context sensitive. So allow me to share a little context on retaining walls in the Highlands neighborhood, Packard's Hill. I've lived in this neighborhood for 6 years, and my 2-year-old and my 3-year-old have climbed literally every retaining wall in the neighborhood. So thanks to them, I feel like I have a good feel for it. I would say there's no detectable uniformity to retaining walls at all in this neighborhood. And I actually think that's part of the charm, is that there's so much variety. And for Tom's wall, it makes sense in the context of the neighborhood. He didn't build something that's super modern here. It doesn't stand out as different, and it certainly fits the block that he's on. As he showed, it's very similar to those houses next to him. So I would suggest that tearing down this wall would not be in the interest of sustainability. It would actually be wasteful, and it would not enhance the neighborhood's aesthetics in any way. On the lighting point, I heard what you guys said about not being able to vary on this issue. However, just in the interest of changing this in the future, our neighborhood is relatively crime-free during the day, but we've had some serious drug dealing problems at night, which resulted in a SWAT team coming to the neighborhood. We've also had a lot of theft in the neighborhood. And if you look at the City of Denver website on neighborhood crime prevention, it literally states that homeowners should use outdoor lights strategically to illuminate pathways and deter intruders. I believe that's exactly what Tom's lighting is doing here. And I think that's actually an enhancement to the neighborhood, rather than, some kind of old school floodlight system. So needless to say, I support the applicant here. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you very much, sir. Did we have another one?
Yes, there was.
Another individual? That's it?
Yeah, there's
Oh,
one.
there's one. Okay. Hello, can you hear us?
You
Hello?
guys hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, yeah. Welcome. You'll have 2 minutes to make your comment. And please begin that 2 minutes with your name and address for our records.
Yes, hi, my name is Saloni Malik. I live at 3254 Osceola, so just right next door to Tom. So I just also wanted to speak on these items. So I walk around the neighborhood all the time. We actually just moved here pretty recently in November. And I go for walks looking at everybody's wall, looking at everybody's garden for inspiration. And I really want to echo what I believe Sam was saying, that there's really a lot of diversity in this neighborhood in terms of what these retaining walls look like. In fact, there's at least 3 other walls that look exactly like Tom's, the same color, the same shape, everything. And I think that it would be really kind of disruptive and wasteful to knock it down just to kind of build something 12 inches back, particularly when it really fits in with the block. And it's honestly one of the most beautiful retaining walls on the block. There's irises and roses, and it really beautifies the neighborhood. And I think that, ruining that, I just don't think that it would serve a huge purpose. Not to mention just the sort of disruption of having construction on the block when it's not really necessary, and not changing something that that, you know, it doesn't disrupt the block as it is. Beyond that, you know, I think that you know, I love the fact that this is a historic district, to be honest with you. You know, I love the fact that we don't have, you know, 4,000 duplexes that, you know, completely look different, you know, than what we have here. But I think that, you know, when you're looking at the letter of the law versus the spirit, I really think that Tom's wall is in keeping with the spirit and that it really matches the character of the neighborhood. And so I just want to support that things kind of stay the way that they are, if the committee would be so kind as to grant an exception, because, you know, he's my neighbor. I walk by it. It doesn't bother me. I actually think it's beautiful. And, you know, I think it looks great.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else lined up?
I think there's one more.
Is that it?
There's one more.
One more, okay. Hello?
Hello, you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can see and hear you.
Hi there, thanks.
Yeah,
My
you'll
name
have
is
to.
Aaron Schlechter. I'm at 325 Osceola. I'm Tom's next door neighbor.
Okay.
He mentioned other houses, 3280, 3272, 3264. Those are the neighbors on the other side. So I'm actually the only one of 5 houses that does not have a retaining wall. And all 4 of those other houses, none of them have a buffer between their wall and the sidewalk. I mean, I must say I'm most partial to Tom's wall of all of them. The landscaping is beautiful. I do think it fits into the neighborhood. I just wanted to interject just to say, I think it goes contrary to like Denver's sustainability and climate goals if for very, very minor aesthetic quibbles, which I frankly wouldn't even agree with. You're gonna have people out here loading like retaining block walls onto a truck and bringing it into a landfill. It just kind of seems, yeah, at odds with everything else we're standing for right now. But that's all I have to say. And thanks for your time.
Absolutely, Aaron, thank you. Anybody else?
Don't think so.
Sorry, I think we're good. Okay, all right, seeing no more public comments on this, did you have any other?
I do.
Okay, cool.
Okay, I forgot to mention this at the end of my presentation, but we received 2 public comments. Those were forwarded on to you via email, and they were in support in keeping the wall and lighting. Moving on to the retaining wall. Retaining walls do require permits and would have triggered landmark review. Permits were never applied for or obtained for this property. The wall was just constructed. So we did not have the opportunity to provide feedback before the wall was constructed, and we would have provided guidance that would have helped in this situation. So as for the rounded corners, there are examples of 2 buildings with rounded corners. Those are along 32nd Street. Those are large substantial houses with large lots around them. And if you look at those photos, it's unclear how these have been altered over time, but they have been somewhat altered. Not to say that those retaining wall curved corners are not original, but I think the context for those 2 examples is pretty important because it's along a very busy thoroughfare and on larger structures and larger lots. As far as the retaining walls that were provided that are non-historic examples, if those were added prior to district designation, if those retaining walls were ever to be altered, removed, changed, etc., they would have to come through landmark for review, and they would have to meet current design guidelines. And our current design guidelines were just updated, as Brittany outlined in the previous presentation, in 2022. And we did quite a bit of community meetings on retaining walls and how those should look for our historic districts and individual landmarks. And these were the comments that came together to create the updated guidelines for retaining walls. that don't allow trapezoidal blocks. And they require a landscape buffer for walls that are over 12 inches in height, as well as having returns that are contextual. And then I would also note here on the garage lighting, he did mention that he got zoning approval, final, and a COA. None of those covered the light fixtures, and as I mentioned previously, those light fixtures have been in violation since at least 2019. So they will need to be addressed. As Brittany pointed out, we have both a landmark and a zoning, and our inspector is both landmark and zoning, and they must enforce the code requirements.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. Yes.
Something that was brought up by the applicant in his presentation was the recording of a landmark violation to his title. When, if ever, does that take place? So that a buyer would be aware that they have an issue?
So we don't write it in with the title, because that travels with the properties. Violations do travel with the property, not the property owner, but if they're brought into compliance, then it's not effective to have it written into the title work. So what we do at this time is they have the opportunity to reach out to Landmark, to 311, to NIS. There are multiple avenues. They could core a request. There are multiple avenues that a property or potential buyer could go to discover any issues with the site. The reason why citations didn't show up on this site is because the previous owner had been working with us. So we halted or paused fines and actually did not issue we didn't issue a fine until just about a month ago. So we, of course, always try and work to bring properties into compliance. We don't try and lead with fines. And that's why there were no recorded fines or liens on the property at the time of purchase. Our inspectors do try and do a good job of checking in on non-compliant sites, but we have.
So the answer to my question is it doesn't make it to title, recorded to title until there's a fine.
It would be a lien against the property.
Yeah.
It wouldn't make it to title, but it would show up as a lien against.
A lien
the property.
shows up on title.
That's not just landmark citations,
Yeah.
for clarity, it's all city citations. If you want a record of city citations that aren't currently have liens on them that go into the title work, you need to check the Acela Citizens Access portal for all permits.
That is also another option for gathering that information.
Thank you. You answered my question.
Questions for Jesse? Adam?
Yes, just to elaborate a bit on that. You buy title insurance and the title insurance tells you what they have found. How the title insurance company gives you that information is up to them. I think what you were referring to is there was some record or some language on the title work saying there's been no like documentation of I can't remember the exact wording of it, but that's basically what the title insurance company looked for and then gave to the owner. If there is an issue with that, then that's kind of a private matter with the title insurance company and that owner on what they decided to put in their commitment and policy.
No, I understand that. My question was specifically, when does the city record a document stating there's an issue with a property?
Got it.
Oh, so there were two separate notices of violation that were posted on this property, one in 2019 to the previous owner and one in 2021 that was addressed to the current owner, and it identified all violations on site.
No, I understand. My question was specific to recording. That's all. Not to notice owners, previous owners, current owners, just recording.
And I do want to note that any types of fines were paused in 2020 because we were in a global pandemic, as we're all aware. So
Right, yeah.
you know, I'm not saying that's the reason this occurred here, but if, you know, if we often are not finding people, but in 2020, we were finding no one per city directive.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, great. Alrighty, then, commissioners, let's go into deliberation. What are your thoughts?
I'm hung up on the lights.
Yeah.
And I've been looking at, I have to get this right. There is an international illumination engineer. I mean, basically the ANSI spec for a full cutoff lighting, right? Which is talking about 0 light escape at 90 degrees from the fixture. So I'm gonna split hairs again, like we did with windows. And there's 2 different fixtures on this house. The Ring security camera, sorry, 2 security lights. Talking about the third one, frankly, is a fixture that would be easier replaced based on its cost than further conversation about just because it's a very simple, okay, that's not our purview. The security light that has the rectangular lamps that's on the back of the house has fixed heads that won't tilt less than 30 degrees, it looks like. The lamps are fully recessed into the plastic housing, right? I'm playing the devil's advocate here. So I could see how, because you can't get to 90 degrees and cut off, that light would not meet a full cutoff. But the security light in the alley also has an LED that's recessed inside the housing. And it appears like they could be turned vertically, which would comply. We're not zoning code folks here, but you know, I'm gonna have a harder time, I think, making someone change a $300 security light because it can comply, even though it's, you know, not really our purview at zoning, right? I understand it's tough. It kind of puts us in a weird position landmarks wise to have a lot of really nice historic fixtures that are definitely not full cutoff, you know, whether they were existing or they're replicas or anything like that. You know, the front porch light isn't a full cutoff. It's a very appropriate fixture, right? So I don't know. There's millions of security lights. Literally, I'm sure, right? Thousands, tens of thousands of them in this city. Seems like the lights are an easier thing than the retaining wall, maybe. But I'm curious what other commissioners think about that.
Well, I guess I'll speak a little bit to my experience of working in jurisdictions that have required this for a long time.
Right. It's not a
That
new requirement.
most jurisdictions that I've ever worked in that require full cutoff fixtures, any adjustable fixture would not meet that because you can, as a homeowner, adjust it to make it non-compliant. And they're trying to discourage that. And so I think that logic would apply here as well.
I'm out of compliance at my own home here for the.
A little defensiveness.
A lot of us probably are. Yeah.
But yeah, then I think
And I'm thankful that they are.
on, you know, from what I understand about the intent of these things, I think as much as I can understand the, you know, homeowners and some of the neighbors' concerns about security, I think, and this is a bit outside of our scope, but I think the intent is to reduce light pollution, which is an increasingly significant problem for a bunch of reasons, so.
Yeah, no, I don't have an issue with the goal. I guess it just seems like. Yeah, that's a tough thing for zoning to do to us, to make us
Yeah,
enforce their.
I know. I feel like we don't
None of
really
these
even have a
fixtures are
choice.
historic. This is a non-contributing
Right.
garage that was recently built. Can we abstain from lighting?
Recommend writing your council person.
Yes.
We're also talking about $400 worth of light fixtures.
Right, yeah.
You know, for that reason, if we don't have a legal avenue to work against this, I don't know that it's worth dwelling on. As unfortunate as that is, I guess let the record show that that's ambiguous at best, right? Which is
Yes.
frustrating.
For sure. I think the retention walls are the biggest.
Yeah, the retaining wall. I've already mourned the loss of the Denver Hill with our last guideline update, so
I have one.
right?
I do wanna state
Pam has one.
the Denver Hill was specifically left out of the Packards Hill Historic District because the community told us they did not want to preserve it. And the option was get a new historic district or preserve a Denver Hill. And we selected to eliminate the Denver Hill from the designation materials for Packards Hill as indicated by the applicant.
Now, of course, this isn't, the Denver Hill, while I love it myself, is actually not particularly relevant here in the sense that what the design guidelines this is found to not be meeting has nothing to do with the Denver Hill itself, it's the materials and the lack of buffer.
Correct. I did just want to provide
Yes.
clarification though
Fair
on
enough.
its
I mean, the existing
exclusion from Packards.
configuration also had a small, I guess it was technically compliant, even though the materials weren't, but it had landscape timber with no buffer, but it was low, right? It was less than a foot. It's the either or game.
What was that? I'm sorry,
Oh,
which,
before
it
this
was an
was
example?
replaced, there was,
Oh.
this property had a stepped landscape timber out front that had deteriorated, but was the 1 foot kick wall that didn't have a landscape buffer, or less than, right?
I did pull up the intent statements around residential site and landscape design. So 5B says to preserve the context of the historic building and district by maintaining historic front yard landscape areas. 5E to maintain traditional features such as topography and plantings that define private yards without obscuring historic properties. And 5F to ensure that new front yard features maintain and enhance the character of historic properties and districts. I think in terms of the context 5D intent piece of it, I think the applicant made some pretty decent arguments that this is contextually not aberrant. And then the 5E defining private yards without obscuring historic properties, I think that this, doesn't really, it's not one of these kind of 8-foot tall things that sometimes you see in more topographically challenged neighborhoods that would obscure the property. So yeah, I think I could support keeping that as much as I think it's frustrating to see, it's frustrating to approve something that somebody did without seeking landmark approval.
Or permit.
Yeah, or a permit, yeah.
Okay, other thoughts? Nick, what are you thinking?
I tend to agree with Larry relative to the retaining wall, and then I'm gonna defer to what consensus is with the group on lighting.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say with the retaining wall, I think, I think staff had a great point that some of the examples that were being brought to our attention, we actually couldn't see the immediate context of the house it was related to, which I think is another important thing. However, there were plenty of examples at next door neighbors that have pretty much the same thing that we're seeing on this property. And while I agree with Larry that it's frustrating to approve something that doesn't have that pre-approval, I think just looking at what else we have in this neighborhood, it seems wasteful and a little overly punitive to ask them to remove this retaining.
Erica? Okay, great. George, what are your thoughts?
This was a hard one for me. I think what we're doing here is twisting ourselves inside out and upside down to try and wiggle out of what a title company should have done in the first place years ago. And I'm going to support the staff on their recommendation. And if it's unfortunate, it's frustrating to me, but we aren't the ones to undo what violations had been cited and not taken care of, and then the property sold. So I think the staff's recommendations are legit based on the information I have in front of me.
So you're supporting denial?
And supporting denial.
Okay. All right, then it sounds like we're sort of split on our thoughts here. Anybody else have any other thoughts before I ask for a motion?
Couple questions.
Sure, Larry.
One is, I guess I didn't clarify how I felt about the lighting or where I was looking on that. The lighting, I think, is straightforwardly in violation. And so then if other commissioners agree with that, would we still need to deny this application on the basis of the lighting and with the deliberation that the applicant has now heard, they can know that, you know, approve the next round if the lighting is correct?
So according to what Jesse said, because a number of the items on this, or if, as I understand it, a number of the items on this application do meet the guidelines, and so those could be administratively approved. So I think if we denied this application, then, and if we, given our testimony, if we supported retention of the retaining wall, then that may also be administratively approved. I'm not sure, Jesse.
So, just for clarification, if you're fine with the retaining wall, but the light fixtures are in violation, as you pointed out, you could do a conditional approval that the light fixtures be full cutoff. The reason why we didn't recommend a conditional approval is because the retaining wall and the light fixtures pose too complex, they would have made too complex of a motion. It wouldn't have been straightforward, because the material form and the lack of landscape buffer were all at issue on the retaining wall and didn't cleanly meet the guidelines. And there's just no way to, without designing it, make straightforward conditions for that.
So here's a question for you. If we deny this, and they come back with different application, it just sounds like it might be cleaner if we deny this application and we can return the application.
The retaining wall is not something we as staff can administratively approve. It doesn't meet
It would
the
come back
design
to us. Yeah,
guidelines.
it would come back to us.
It would only, it's the only time we could administratively approve it if it cleanly meets the guidelines.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Okay.
So we're looking at a conditional approval.
I think I could try something here.
Sure, Larry.
Okay.
Thanks, Jesse.
I move to conditionally approve application number 2023-COA-293 for the violations at 3248 Osceola Street, per design guidelines 5.8, well, yes, 5.8, 5.18, character defining features for the Packard Hill Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation and information provided in the staff report, with the condition that the light fixtures be replaced to meet guideline 5.18.
Okay.
I'll second, but then I'd like to make a friendly amendment.
Certainly.
That because it's not a denial, that we also reference the other design guidelines. 2.24, 2.63, 5.6, I believe.
I accept the amendment.
Excellent.
As do I.
Okay, all right, great. All right, all in favor?
I'm sorry, before
Yeah.
you vote,
Yes, please.
I guess I would just ask a question for the board. So the condition was that the light fixtures be replaced to meet guidelines. Do you all feel that is something that is a definite yes? So there's no discretion in that? Do you see what I'm getting at? Is that a condition that staff can just say, okay, this condition has been met? Because when I see meeting the guidelines, I still feel that there's some discretion in that. Did that item meet the guidelines or not through.
Do you want to use, amend it to include Graham's language of just full cutoff light fixtures?
Full
instead
cutoff
of-
light fixtures.
I mean, yeah, I think maybe to say in deliberation here for staff and the applicant that it seems like based on our conversation, the general character of the fixtures, whether a non-historic security light or a historic or appropriate front porch light is acceptable, provided that it meets the zoning requirement. I think we would have otherwise approved the lighting with the exception of the zoning requirement, making them non-compliant, right? So
And the down light requirement is part of 5.18.
it is,
Yeah, so-
yeah, it says down, it doesn't say 90-degree down.
Okay, I see. Yeah, the
I'm gonna keep
specifics
splitting
of
hairs
that.
on you.
And again, I just really ask that for the boards, for you all to consider if whether that is a discretionless condition, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that same guideline says that light fixtures along the alley should be utilitarian. They are, you know, we're all on the single level. It's, you know, down oriented. I don't know. For me, it comes to the full cutoff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we're just trying to make this as clear as possible for staff and as clear as possible for the
Yeah,
applicant. And if it's too general to leave it with the guideline referenced, then let's make it real specific and simple.
It's giving me an amendment.
Yeah, who is proposing that?
Sure, so how about a friendly amendment to change the condition from compliance with guideline 5.18 to meeting the requirements for full cutoff?
Per the
Zoning code, yeah. What was our section of the zoning code if we wanna reference that? It even says in a friendly reminder in providing the zoning requirements of, it's zoning code section 10.7 is what our guidelines say. Is that adequate?
It's 10.7.4.2 to be specific.
Okay. So the condition that the lighting meets Denver zoning code 10.7.4.2.
I accept the amendment.
All right.
Thank you, Julia, as Erica does as well. All right, let's try to take a vote. Well, we're gonna take a vote. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, thank you very much. So the applicant, you'll be visiting with Jesse and working that out. All right, so generally at 3 o'clock, we take a little break, but we only have one more item. Would you want to take a break or just go forging ahead?
Madam Chair, I think in order to meet an appointment, I've got to.
Yeah, Graham needs to leave us at this point, and please be careful.
I'll stop meddling, I promise.
Yeah.
Been very helpful.
Yeah, he's gonna go split hairs on a job site now.
I think as a commission member, you're supposed to meddle.
That's true.
I think that's
Supposed to stir it up.
that's our charge. Alright, so for the record, Commissioner Graham Johnson is leaving the meeting. But we still do have a quorum, so yeah, drive safe.
Awesome, thank you.
Are we taking a break?
Are we taking a break or are we gonna forge ahead?
Okay, well.
Let's
but if
forge
it's-
ahead.
if-
That's fine.
But if, no,
No, it's fine.
let's take a break.
No, no, no.
No, let's take a break.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Let's.
Let's take a 5-minute break.
Yeah.
guys. Sorry about that. Oh my God, I can't even decide. Okay, anybody joining us virtually, we'll be back in 5 minutes. So sorry about that. All right, our 5-minute break is over. Thank you for your patience. Our next and final design review project is 2024-COA-316 at 3025 Osceola Street in the Wolf Place District, and Amy is our staff person. Amy, take it away.
Yep, Amy Amadon, Design Review Supervisor, presenting 3025 North Osceola.
Amy,
And-
can you turn on the video?
Yes, what do I do? Sorry.
Click on.
Yes. So sorry for my rookie mistakes.
No worries, I'm still making them.
There I
4
am.
years later.
Okay. 3025 North Osceola, and I was about to say we have the homeowner Max Rosenblum here to present his case to you after I give the staff summary. And the reason we're here is to talk about shingle siding replacement on 4 sides of the house, really spurred by a hail event that Max is trying to address various necessary repairs. One thing I didn't mention in the staff memo, I just want to call your attention to, there's a 2021 COA that exists for this property for a few exterior alterations. It's still valid. It's never been acted on. Max is a newer homeowner. He's inherited that approval and he may do some of the work. For instance, he and I have worked on a front door replacement. There may be a reconstruction of a front porch here that was approved. There was one historically and it was removed at some time. So if you happen to go by this property in the future and you're seeing work that we didn't talk about, I just want you to know why. Next slide, please. So as I said, we're going to discuss shingle siding replacement of 4 sides of the house. Most of the discussion is pretty easy because staff supports the proposed replacement on the rear and on dormers, and I'll quickly explain why. So you see a site plan view of the home, and this first slide is about the rear facade, or otherwise known as the west gable end, faces the alley. In this gable end, the shingles do not appear to be historic. They do not dye into the trim. They are proud of the trims. They look like they've been layered on top of something. They don't have a heavy buildup of paint. They look like the paint has been applied with a roller. They're just not reading as original shingles. And staff recommends the replacement be permitted here. Next slide, please. There are dormers on both sides of the roof. So this, first of all, it seems that the authenticity of these 2 dormers is somewhat in question. They're a different design. One's a shed, one's a gable. They sit very high on the roof. They're very bulky. So we question whether this is original material for that reason. But otherwise, these shingles have been heavily damaged by bounce back of the hail hitting the roof, and then the shingles, they're rather chewed up. And for that reason, we do support replacement of the shingles on this dormer. Next slide, please. As well as the opposite one, the south side. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the dormers the shingles we really need to talk about are on the front facade. And the applicant has additional photos. I'm just showing you kind of zoomed in images here. We believe these are historic for several reasons. Similar to other homes in the neighborhood, they're alternating courses of octagonal and square shingles. They're very decorative. There is heavy paint buildup. They tested positive for lead paint, which the homeowner had examined. They appear to be applied directly to historic sheathing. Just all signs say they dye into the trim appropriately. All signs say these are original. We acknowledge that there's deterioration here, crazed paint, and what typical deterioration from age, but we do not find that wholesale replacement meets the design guidelines. So we are recommending, next slide, please, that the LPC allow replacement of shingles on the rear and 2 dormers. And we suggest a condition that can either be accomplished by shingles that are in strips, as long as they're installed so that they completely fill the field that they're applied to, that they dye into trim appropriately, that they look as close as possible to individual shingles. So that is an option, or actual individual shingles. We recommend LPC does not approve replacement of the shingles in the main gable end. There is lead paint on them. I have discussed with the homeowner some of the techniques that are appropriate for lead paint removal. Obviously, that's common on homes of this vintage. This is 1883. It's actually older in the neighborhood than some of the other structures. It has good integrity, and we hope to see a repair rather than a replacement here. I think that's it, if you have any questions.
All right, commissioners, any questions for Amy? Sounds like it. Well, thank you very much. All right, Max, would you like to tell us about your project?
Yeah.
Thanks for your patience. That's
Oh,
sorry.
no, this was an entertaining
Well, I'm glad you thought so.
educational experience for me.
Well, okay, so you know your
So,
name and your address first
yeah,
before you have
my
10
name's-
minutes to talk.
Thank you. My name is Max Rosenblum. I'm at 3025 Osceola. I did give some slides. I don't know if those are able to be pulled up or not. But while those are being pulled up, just kind of want to talk about the halo event that sparked all of this. I work in the restoration industry. I own a business that helps contractors process insurance claims. So I'm really familiar with the process. After an adjuster came and assessed the damages to my property, the insurance carrier wrote up for replacement of all the wood shingles on the house because there was damage on all of them. Actually, they there wasn't on the rear, but I have a part of my policy that, you know, there's matching, so they would pay to replace it, so to make it all uniform. So when it comes to, you know, what you guys do and what my intentions are is, you know, is mutually aligned, which is to keep the integrity of the neighborhood and of the home and of the original products of the house. So, you know, if, you know, what I would like to do is to replace like kind of quality. But, you know, when it comes to these shingles, yes, there are individual shingles, but when it goes to repairing or replacing them, what multiple contractors felt was that no matter how gentle they would be, there would be significant subsequent damage. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please, because I spent, okay, so yes, you know, here's some photos of the damage. Here, if you wouldn't mind continuing next slide. Yeah, so you could see I spent a good amount of time drawing these beautiful circles on Photoshop of the damaged shingles. So you could see it is all over the front elevation. And you know, these were the ones that would definitely need to be replaced. They're splintered, they're cracked. Water will get in there. We all know how it works in Denver. Everything expands and contracts. That's why everyone's windshields are broken. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. What I circle on the next slide here is the subsequent damages that myself and the contractors I spoke with really feel will happen if we were to do the replacement of the damaged shingles. So if you take a look at this photo, it's all over the front of the the wood siding there. So you know, just to replace this many, it just, there's no way it would look uniform, right? It would, you know, and I don't think any of us would want to live in a polka dot house, but you know, when it comes to the shingle itself, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. You know, I called a bunch of suppliers, you know, as far as Texas, as near as you know, some suppliers along the Front Range. You know, I gave them the dimensions of the shingles. Obviously, no one has a product that's exact. So what I had to do was bring in a wood fabricator just to kind of take a look at what's existing. And I found multiple people that were willing to make exact replications of the shingles themselves. So when it came to you know, what would want to replace with is as close with a like kind quality product as possible. You know, I have no intention of putting vinyl or aluminum or anything else up like that. No, I actually love the look of the neighborhood and of the original wood. It's just when it comes to, you know, repairing the damages, just how much paint is there, how brittle the material is that exists. It's so significant that you can't make it look the way you would want it to look on your home. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. I believe, yeah, I have an estimate from the contractor. So as you could see, like we have it says 387 of these shingles for the front. When it comes to the products on the other sides of the dormers and stuff like that, you know, we already kind of discussed, like that is conditionally approved, right, Amy? Correct. But when it came to the front of the house, like I said, it was important to me, and you know, I'm sure as to the committee here that that like kind of quality has to be as close as possible to you know, really be considered here for approval. Yeah, I believe that's the final slide for me. Wouldn't mind just double checking. Next slide.
Yep, that's it.
Okay,
Great.
that's it.
Okay, excellent. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Max? Or applicant? It does not look like there are any questions, so thank you very much.
Great, thank
So now we'll see if there are any public comments any comments from the public? Do we have anybody? It does not look like it. Okay, great. Damon, did you have anything else that you wanted to?
No.
Okay, all right, then, whoops.
No 5 minutes.
No, we already did that. All right, everybody, commissioners, what are your thoughts?
I can start.
Thank you.
I would just like to say I appreciate where the applicant is coming from. I appreciate the additional background and reasoning given behind his effort to replace the shingles on the front of the house. That said, I do support staff relative to their belief that the front is worth salvaging and therefore would support their suggested motion.
All right, Larry?
Yeah, I agree. It seems like the argument has basically, the applicant's argument has basically been that it's harder to do it this way, which is not, I could see that being the case, but the, that's part of the idea of landmark districts and structures, is that even though it will maybe be more challenging to do certain things to maintain them, that putting in that effort is worth it for the preservation of the fabric of the buildings.
Okay. George? Erica?
I can agree with the staff on this, having been there, done that in our 1886 Queen Anne. This is doable, so I can support the staff.
I guess, is it okay to ask a question of staff?
Why not?
Did you consider looking at the preservation brief from the Park Service for wood shingles? Because usually they'll have like a percentage threshold of like if it's
Yeah.
more than this and.
I can specifically refer to that and I can provide that to Max. Certainly did not look from his circles identifying the shingles that in his assessment needed to be replaced, that was 50%. When you add in the possible collateral damage, that does broaden the area, but that's not a given. It takes the
Right.
light hand and the right tools to
Mhm.
slide this shingle out and put one back in, and the goal is not to break everything around it.
Right.
So I didn't find that it was at a point that we were over a 50% threshold.
Because it actually mentions 20% in the
Well, my
preservation.
apologies. I did not refer to the brief.
So I guess that makes me
That is
slightly
not
wonder.
One of our adopted decision-making documents, so
It is not or is?
it is not.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I'm sorry to kind of throw a wrench in that.
No, that's okay.
I mean, I do agree with my fellow commissioners that in this case, it seems like this is doable, and it's hard to know exactly. Again, knowing that the preservation briefs are not like what we are held to use. But even at that threshold, it doesn't necessarily seem like we're there. So I would support staff.
All right, okay. I don't disagree with any. I know it's hard work, but it's- considering that it's original on one of the oldest buildings in the neighborhood, I think it's important. All right, do I hear a motion from commissioners?
I think this one's long enough that I can do it. Madam Chair, I move to approve with conditions application number 2024-COA-316, 3025 North Osceola Street, allowing for shingle siding replacement on the upper floor west gable end facing the alley, the north facing shed roofed dormer and the south-facing gable roof dormer, while in the east gable end facing Osceola Street, only selective replacement of individual shingles, which are beyond repair as approved as per design guidelines 2.1, 2.3, 2.4, 2.8, and 2.10. Character defining features for the Wolf Place Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report. In all other locations other than the east gable end, the applicant may install individual wood shingles or may install strips of wood shingles to the extent that a matching product is specified in the building permit and the shingles are installed so that each row of shingles is cut to fully fill the wall plane without gaps in the material where the shingles die into trim.
Second.
And George has seconded it. Thank you, Nick and George. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, Max, you'll be working with Amy on that. All right, so that is the end of our design review projects. Do we have any business items?
No business items. Just a friendly reminder that we will have an adjusted schedule for July. So we will be meeting on July 9th, which is the second Tuesday of the month. And notification will go out on July 2nd for that meeting. Additionally, I'm really hoping we have new commissioners, but I have not heard from the mayor's office. So if everyone can plan on being there, as we're pretty close to quorum currently. Thank you.
We're real close to quorum. Any other discussion items?
No other discussion.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions for Brittany? Okay, then the meeting is adjourned. It is 3:31. See you in July.